Folks, all I was saying online today is that we're going to be covering the 1 to 4 contract, third-party financing addendum, non-real tenant addendum, buyer's right to terminate due to lender's appraisal, HOA addendum, and I think that's it. But we'll show you how we create all that. We're going to start in DocuSign, be jumping back and forth between DocuSign and the MLS so we know where to look for these items when you're trying to figure out what goes in this blank and what goes in that blank. It's going to be a lot of fun. Not really, but it's a lot of valuable information.
In other words, you'd suggest us watch you instead of trying to replicate.
It doesn't matter. Some people are able to type along. Like, I'm a slow typer, so I probably wouldn't be very good trying to, keep up with everything. But I would say still have it on your screen and have it ready to go. And then, like I said, but if you get somewhere, you get hung up a little bit, don't worry about it. It's been recorded. And in all honesty, guys, I'm a little disappointed today because I was hoping that we were going to be covering the latest version of the contract, which was supposed to be released on June 1st. Mandatory July 1st. It's still not in zip forms right now. So there are a couple of changes that are going to be happening once that does become available. And I'll talk about those when we get to the old section or the section that's in the contract that's going to be get replaced. We'll talk about what the difference is going to look like. And for the most part, it's all good things. So don't sweat it too much. But yeah, Chrissy and I were just pulling up this morning. Unfortunately, templates didn't update. And even if I try to go into the library right now in zip forms, it's still showing the old November 2024 version right now. And that's how we can always tell by looking at the dates.
The things on the bottom of the contract?
Actually, on the top, I believe, on the top right corner, I believe.
And I'll re-ask a question I asked Mario. Not that I'm not know the answer, but just for we started contract in June, and it's not finished until July. Redo the contract.
Yeah, once your contract is executed, that's what the paperwork you're going to use, right? But if it's not executed before July 1st, then you should use all the new paperwork once it becomes available, or it actually becomes mandatory. It should be available now once it becomes mandatory July 1st. So any listing agreements that you've created right now, cool. If you go under contract with a buyer this week, no problem. But once July 1st hits around, if it has not an executed contract, so if you were negotiating on June 30th and you finally came to terms on July 1, don't just edit the old version, go and start a new one at that point. Hopefully that's something that we're all working on, writing a bunch of contracts at the end of June, and we have to figure that out. So like I said, we're going to be toggling between two main screens, which is going to be our MLS. So hopefully everyone can log into that. And then obviously our DocuSign, so that way we can pull up a transaction room and create a room for a potential client. Now, a couple of things. I will use the version of MLS that you guys are probably looking at. I use a classic version because, well, I don't like learning new things, and this is what it looked like for me for the last 14 plus years, and so I keep on using it. But everyone's screen should look like this initially when you first come in. You can actually personalize this in case you're not aware of it. I do recommend taking an MLS class down at the board. They can show you little things. I remember I took mine about 6 months into my real estate career, sat there very bored for 2 hours, and then they told me how to open a new workspace, and it was all worth it at that point. So you will gain something from it, even if you've been doing this for a little bit or if you've already been playing in the MLS for a little while. One thing I will point out, guys, a little separate from the class, this market activity square over here is one of my favorite places, and I will talk about this ad nauseum to make sure I make a point of it. So you'll notice yours might look a little bit different than mine because I've tailored mine down to be customized to the part of town that I live in. The default is just to show all of San Antonio's new activity, all the new listings, all the active listings. Now, the way I change that is by clicking this little customize button, and you'll see it pulled up this window here, and I added in these MLS areas as my default. So all the 1800s, 1803, 1804, 1802, 1801, 600, 1400, and 1500. Now, why did I do that? I live right here. I used to live right there. My brother lives here. My mom lives here. My sister lives up there. My kids went to school down here. I have my brother's gym is over here. What I'm saying is this is where I spend the bulk of my life, right? So this is the part of town I want to be most familiar with and where I want to have that market knowledge just readily available. And so part of my daily routine, and something I recommend that you guys do as well, is to check the market activity for your area. So you're going to customize it. Don't try to make rhyme or reason of these MLS numbers. I still don't know why they ever came up the way they did. What's an 1800 and what's a 400 and why, they don't go in a numerical order. They really make no sense. They're not zip codes. They're not area codes. I don't know what they are. Someone many, many years ago before I was in real estate designated these numbers. So figure out on this map where you're at, kind of pick your area, or if it's not the area that you live in, that you want to work, but somewhere else, do that. Sometimes we do that. Like Joe Kodash lives here in Chinook, but he likes to specialize downtown in Monte Vista and Alta Vista and Tobin Hill and all those areas. So that's where he's really concerned with. But something I do is every day I come here and I like to see the new listings that hit the market. Okay. I'll go on here. Today we've only had 10 hit the market. It's only 11 o'clock though. Usually Thursdays and Fridays tend to be our busiest day when it comes to activity. And I'll come look at the most expensive house, Comanche Creek over in Indian Springs. This is in the Estates, I'm assuming, if it's at this price point. 5,000 square foot house, almost a quarter acre with the pool at $965 in Indian Springs. Oh, beautiful home. Priced out of the neighborhood. This will not sell for $965. I will guarantee my career on it right now. And I can say that confidently. Why? Because I've been looking at market activity in Indian Springs for the last 14 years. And I know, and I've sold houses in this neighborhood. I've sold houses in the adjacent neighborhoods. And yes, they over improved their property and they're kind of comparing themselves. And if I looked at the little map as to where they're at, back up over here right now, they're in the estate side without really an estate property. So usually this should probably be closer to about 800,000 on the top end. And here again, it does have a nice finish out. It's got a nice pool. It's one of the smaller lots for the estates though. I'll be surprised if they get that. I really will. And I used to play this game with myself. I would actually track properties, make a prediction, put it in a favorites folder, and then go back and look at it later on to see if I was going to be right or not. You know what I mean? But I don't think they'll get anywhere close to 965. This will sell for under 900, probably around 825 is probably what I'm thinking. That's how much of a discount, especially right now. They're thinking they're in 2022 and 2023, and that's not the case. And so I could be wrong. There could be some crazy Californian that comes out and says, "Oh my God, this is perfect." But you'll notice they don't back up to Boulevardy, but so they don't have a rear neighbor, which is nice. And this is a nice break here. The topography, imagine you'll see how the pool's kind of floating in the treetops over here. So the backyard just drops because that's how all those houses on that side does. So needless to say, it's more of me just looking at these things. Monteverde, $699, probably close to about that. I don't understand why people spend money like that in this neighborhood, but they do. Prospect Creek and Kinder Ranch, $699. You better have a pool back there. It looks like they have a little side pool. Okay, so maybe they might be able to pull this price off because of the pool and everything on that. The Vineyard, nice, 549.43, be slightly updated, and you are going to go. Maybe not be slightly updated. Still feel a little bit original in here, but it looks clean. It looks neutral. It looks nice at 550 in the Vineyard. Updated the master bathroom. That's nice. Nice backyard, little pergola in the back. Yep, they'll get that price all day long. Heck, I have a client who might want to look at that. And that's why I do this, is because I'm keeping these properties in mind so that next time I'm here at HEB and I run into someone and I start chatting them up, isn't so that way I've memorized everything I see here, but it kind of keeps me in the back of my head. And I will do this periodically throughout the day. First thing in the morning when I sit down on the computer, I look at the new activity. When I'm having lunch, I look at the new activity. Before I leave the office for the day, I look at the new activity, just to kind of get used to that system. So this is something I want for you guys to make part of your daily plan as well. And then now we'll talk about contracts. So let's pick one of these fun properties, and this can become our subject property. And what I was talking about, so I'm just going to take this MLS number and change the view for you guys. I like this house. See how this lotto works out. I might be making an offer on that house. Actually, let's see if it's good, if it's a good agent or not. Let's see if they, yes, they are. Okay, cool. So I'm going to change my view to make it look like what you guys look at, which I think is this, correct? Is this what most of you guys see when you look at the MLS? This kind of version looks like this?
Yeah.
If you guys want to pull up the property, the MLS number is 1973042. If you guys want to have that up as well, so you can kind of see where I'm going back and forth and looking for things. So just pull up your MLS, type in that smart bar. You can type that MLS number right in there, 1973042, or you can type in the address and it should pop up and it'll be there. Now, when you first look at this, the way MLS has broken this down, they've kind of given you general tabs. And in all honesty, this is probably a more user-friendly version than what I look at, but I just know where everything is at when I look at it. So that's why I like to keep it the way I do, right? But you'll see it breaks it down by tab. So school information is here, exterior features are there, interior features are here, the room information, tax and HOA is down here, utility information, listing information will show me who listed the property, and then the office and sales agent remarks and things like that are down at the bottom. So if you're not sure where to find something, look at that taskbar and you might be able to pop in to understand that information. Now, we've looked at these pictures, and so the idea behind this exercise today, guys, is that you've been out looking at properties, right? You already have a buyer client. You've already established a buyer's representation agreement with them, general information notice to a consumer, information about brokerage services, and then the information about insurance, right? You have all those documents signed already because you already did that buyer consultation. You already sat with them. And when you're out looking at properties, at one point, they're going to say, Alberto, Carol, Tony, this is the one. This is the one that I want to get. And it's fun because you feel that excitement, and you can sometimes pick up the energy of your client when they start looking at it, and you realize, oh, wow, they really like this one, right? Now, at that point, when they say, I think we want to make an offer on this, right? Now, depending on how the day is going, if I had just shown this one property to them, I may have done a little bit more pre-work as far as like running the CMA for the neighborhood, reviewing the seller's disclosure, looking at any other documents that might be there. But realistically, guys, if you're out there showing 10, 12 properties in one day, it's almost impossible to have done that for every one of those 12 properties. Because even in your mind, when you're showing 12 properties, there are some throwaway properties in there, right? There are some properties that we're just seeing because they said they really wanted to see it. And this property's not going to work for them, but that's my job. So let me go show the property anyways, right? Hopefully over time, you get to eliminate that as your clients start to trust you a little bit more, and you advise that, you said you wanted 4 bedrooms. This is only 3, but it has an office. Yeah, but are you going to put your kid in a room with double doors and no closet? I don't think so. So you'll start to kind of come with some of those objections, but it's all right. You're going to show a lot of properties. It's how you're going to gain more knowledge as well, right? So beautiful home. We looked at it. They loved it. They want to make an offer on it. Now, I will recommend as a newer agent, at that time, you're going to say, great, I'm going to get back to my office, run some numbers on it, write up the stuff. I'll be in contact with you and we'll discuss an offer strategy. Now, what I did there was I separated myself from the situation, because as a new agent, you're going to go into panic mode, right? Oh, crap, I actually got to write a contract. Driving back to the office or to your house or your computer, wherever it's at, to go figure that out. You'll be panic texting myself or Aaron, I'm going to be writing my first offer. Is someone available to review it? Yes, we'll be available to review it. Don't worry. Get out there, write up something, and we'll get to it, right? And that's all well and good, because then you are going to run some numbers on it. You're going to break down the neighborhood. We're going to make an offer price. You might have a phone conversation with your client to kind of strategize as to, okay, at $549, wow, I really like this house, Alberto. Is it priced well for it? I really don't want to miss out onto it. Now, had we looked at this property and it's 200 days on market, right, I'm going to have a different strategy than one that's first day on market. If it's been subsequent price changes all the way down, I might have a different strategy. But that, guys, we're going to talk about more in week 4 of your momentum when we do our buyer's workshop. Today, we're just going to plug in numbers and pretend like everything's just normal here, right? So I would have also made a phone call to this lovely person here. Who are they? It's Kat Lodge. I know Kat well. Our kids go to school together. Again, hey, Kat, how's band going? Guess what? My client loves your new listing right there. Bastard, she steals all the stuff here in Stone Oak, but I like her anyway. She's a sweet Australian lady over at Cooper Sotheby's. See her when you drive by all the elementary schools, you'll see her little smiling face on all the poster boards out there, right? She's got a good presence, and she is genuinely a good person. So I actually really do like her. And her son is in band with my son right now, my stepson. Anyways, so to call, hey, Kat, we really like Belle Claire. Tell me about it. Anything I can help my client win the offer right now, right? Because I'm going to go back, write up, do some numbers, and present something to you. Now, I do that for a couple of reasons. I want to know, am I competing against anyone else, right? Are there other offers presented on the table right now? If my clients have some things that are flexible, maybe a move-in date, maybe how they can structure their loan or something like that, I might want to see if any of that's going to be attractive to them. Can I see the house is still totally furnished right now? What is your seller situation? Are they trying to get out as quick as possible? Or are they still waiting for something else to close? Try to get that situation, because if my clients have flexibility when it comes to closing date, I might use that to my advantage. Well, bro, they're going to need a short lease back because their house they're building isn't done yet. Or they wanted to try to stay through this date because graduation's happening or school year's almost over, or whatever the case is. So I wanted to know going into for my buyer consultation, my client's desired move-in date, things like that. Because if I have a client who has a lease that's maybe still going for 2 more months, well, it's not a big deal for me if I'm going to let her sellers either have a long closing date or a lease back because my guys have a place to live. Now, if my clients are moving here from out of state and kids start school the next week and they need to get into something as quick as possible, well, then I can't really concede on those negotiating points, right? But I want to get some information as best I can so I can structure my offer with the best opportunity, not only to get it accepted, but for the best terms of my client as well. So all good. I like working with Kat. We actually haven't done a deal together. We're just friends, but it'll be fun if we could do one. Now, at this point, I've got to start a new room, right? Now, theoretically, you have a room created for these people already, right? You already have their buyer's rep created in a room. You have their IBS, all those documents. I'm not sure what Mario told you to do in this situation, but I will tell you what I do in this situation. I start a new room based off of this property. Knowing that, I am just going to share my buyer's rep from that other room and my IBS from the other room to this new room if it gets to the point where I'm actually submitting it to close, right? Because right now I'm just writing an offer. That's all I'm doing. I'm writing an offer with the hope that it's going to get accepted, but I don't know if that's going to be the case or not, right? So if I start a new room, and I'm going to cheat a little bit on you guys so I can see what I'm doing over here. I'm just going to create a second workspace, and I'm going to drag it over to this screen so I can see it over here as well. So that way I'm not going back and forth so much. So got to type in the zip code first of the property, 78258. I'll start typing in the address here, 1319, and it should start finding it for me. There it is, Belle Claire. I always just use the address for my room name. I'm not that creative. Obviously, if it's buyers, I'll put their names in there, instead of an address. I don't have one, but in this case, I do. I'm an agent. I will be on the buy side. Now, I will take the 2 minutes to come over here, grab this first photo, save it. I like having a picture. So all I did was just download it real quick, go to my download folder. It just makes it look prettier. That's really what it boils down to. And then the address should have all been populated because I found it up top, right? So cool. We all have 1319 Belle Claire, brand new room. And then I hit save. Now at this point, nothing's there, right? It's just the created room. I haven't linked a zip forms transaction to it yet. I haven't uploaded any other documents, but I will jump over here to the documents tab. And the first thing I typically do is I download the documents that have been provided to me by the listing agent. Now, where do I find those? So in my MLS, if I come up to the top here, you're going to see additional information. And if I click on this, it shows she has a brag list called property features. She has her offer instructions, so what she would like us to do if we're presenting an offer. She has a seller's disclosure, and then she has a Cooper Sotheby's notice to buyers. So this is an internal document that they use within their office that they would like buyers to sign on any of their listings as well. Read through it. It's pretty straightforward. To me, it's very redundant if you just included a general information notice to a buyer or seller. If you looked at your IBS, if you looked about your information about property insurance, all the disclosure forms we make our clients sign anyways, they just reinvent the wheel. It's right here anyways. So to me, some Cooper Sotheby's lawyer, wanted to make some money. And so they wrote up this document for them. And it's a lot of like cover there, what. So, you provide it to your buyer, they read through it. Technically, you could say, nope, I'm not doing it. But once again, why be contentious? It's nothing, it's trying to remove a lot of the liability off of Cooper Sotheby's. But in all honesty, had you provided the disclosure documents like general information notice to a buyer or seller, like the seller's disclosure, like the IBS, most of the content within this is the exact same thing, right? So I will go ahead and take the time to download this document real quick. It's named their little guy here, but I'm going to probably include 1319 Belle Claire because I've actually downloaded this document from Cooper's a couple times. So I want to make sure it's appropriate to the appropriate property, right? And hit save. I will have now gone over to the seller's disclosure and done the same thing because my client will need to sign that when we submit the offer. So at this time, when I pull it up, if I haven't already, that's the big distinction. I'm going to read through it real quick, right? So seller they're occupying the property, which was pretty obvious when I looked at it. Now, I'm not going to go line by line, check mark by check mark. That's not really relevant. What I tend to do is I look for the blanks, meaning that I want to see the age of the roof, 9 years. Okay, good to go. You know, yes, there was a sprinkler system, grass and shrubs. Cool. I'm looking to see if anything is written in these blanks because that is where they have to explain things that went wrong. Roof was replaced due to hail damage in 2017. Installer was asked to return to repair a leak where the garage meets the house. So they disclosed whatever happened to the roof and why they changed it there. So that's good to know. And then I also would have looked real quick to make sure we're not in a floodplain, but I know that all of the neighborhood of Vineyard doesn't sit in a floodplain, so I would have been okay. I would have perused that pretty quickly. HOA 270 quarterly. It's nice to kind of make sure there's no unpaid dues, which there isn't. No previous inspection to look at, and they have their 3 exemptions on there, which is important for me to note because if these aren't applicable to my client, we have to understand that what they're paying in taxes might not be accurate to what my client could be potentially paying in taxes, right? So, yep, he might get the homestead, but if he's not a senior citizen or disabled veteran, those 2 aren't going to apply, right? Does the property work? Detectors are installed throughout the house, unknown if they meet the requirements of the health and safety code. I like this seller. That means they're very, they're answering all the questions just right. And then they've signed. So once again, I'm going to download this guy. No question? No? Okay. I'm going to download this guy, do the same thing. 1319, Bill Claire. And boom, now it's in my download folder. I don't really care about the property features. It's nice to read through them. You know, it's good to kind of know what the things that I've done. This is all, a lot of listing agents and sellers will do this to help justify the valuation they've given to it, right? But it's pretty obvious when I look through it. Some of these things, it's funny. What I always try to tell my sellers, some are structural, so they're good improvements that should have been done. Others are cosmetic. And then what's funny, structural stuff like the new roof, the AC system, well, my expectation is that the roof works. My expectation is that the AC blows cold. So while those are nice, they're not necessarily adding that much value to a property because they should be working, right? But the, wrought iron fence along the green belt, that's cool. New quartz countertops in the kitchen, the pergola, engineered hardwood floors, I'm surprised they didn't say anything about the primary bathroom remodel. Okay, good. So those are things that actually justify the value because when I'm looking at this property that was built back in 1997, and I would go to the Vineyard and look at other similar properties that were built back then, I want to know that this isn't a time capsule for my college days, but instead an actual property that's been updated and maintaining to what's going on right now, right? Class of 98. Thank you very much. 98. So that's why I shaved the beard off, man. It shows too much gray now. Anyways, so what I'm going to do back in my DocuSign room is the first 2 documents I'm going to add are those 2 I just downloaded right now, right? So I will go to the Add tab, use my computer, and there they are, defaulted to my download folder. I'm just going to take these first 2 and drop them in there. So all I've done right now is just added the 2 documents that I know that will eventually be part of my eventual offer when I submit it to my client for signature. But now I need to add the promulgated forms that I'll need to actually submit that offer, that 1/4 contract, all that good stuff here. So I'm going to go to the same tab, Add, but now I'm going to go to Zip Forms. And it's going to tell me, hey, you have no transaction rooms created yet at this point, or nothing's linked to it. So let's create one. And it's going to confirm the address. It's going to confirm that this is a purchase, and it's going to select the property type. And by me selecting residential, and now it knows what template to assign to this transaction. Had I said it was a commercial property, that'd be a different template. If I said it was industrial, different one. But we created your templates to match whatever property type. So by saying purchase and by saying residential, it's going to go to my buyer template. Now, it'll ask you, am I going into the library to just find some random documents, or do I just want to use the linked transaction that's going to have all those templated documents for me? I'll say linked transaction. Now note, my template is a lot smaller than your template. Because the idea behind a template, this is before we preloaded them for the office, was what documents do I use most frequently that I can always just have applied to a transaction, so I'm not having to go through the library every time to search them out, right? So I created my template before it was a thing. And I found over time, I don't do too many lead paint things, so I'm not going to really, I don't sell too many houses that were built before 1978, so I don't have to worry about that. I don't really sell too many houses that have on-site sewer systems, so that's not part of my template. I've written one backup contract in my 14 plus years, so I don't have a backup addendum in there. I've written, the loan assumption addendum. So there's certain things that aren't going to be there because I don't use very frequently. Your templates, we put a lot of stuff in there because I'd rather you go through it and say, nope, this isn't applicable to this transaction, than be like, just forget all about it and then realize you missed something later on, okay? But the ones we're going to add today, though, is going to be the 1-to-4 contract, the addendum concerning right to terminate due to lender's appraisal, the addendum for property subject to mandatory membership in a property owner association. You could always just throw in an amendment because, more than likely at some point, you're going to amend this contract, whether it be a repair request, financial consideration, whatever. So I always just have it there. I don't need the buyer's walkthrough or acceptance form right now, but it would be something I would have eventually if I got this far. The compensation agreement between broker and owner, these two are going away. So we're not going to even talk about those today because once that new contract comes out, they will no longer be in play anymore at this point, right? So we're going to leave both of those alone. I would have had my general information notice to a buyer or seller signed already because of a previous transaction, right? I would have had my information about property insurance signed. I would have had my IBS signed, but I would need my non-realty. I already have my buyer's rep signed, and I would need a third party. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So here we go, right? And I would hit add, and after a long little dramatic pause, they would populate into my room. Now, once again, remember, I'm not having the buyer's rep because in this scenario, I already have it signed because I did my buyer consultation a month ago with this person, and it's there waiting for me right now. Now we look at our room and we're going to see two different types of files in here in case Mara didn't talk about this. You see one that has a little blue square that says ZFX on the right, and then one that says PDF, right? Anything that says ZFX, I can still edit. I can go in there, fill in blanks, erase blanks, type stuff in. It's an editable document. If it says PDF, it's just that. It's a PDF. I can't change or write on PDFs. Once I send these documents out for signature, and I'll show you how we do that, they'll change again and they'll say signed next to it. And now it's essentially a PDF at that point because it's no longer editable and it is signed by the other party. So we always start with the 1-to-4 contract. There's certain information that you can put in there that will then just automatically populate to the other documents. Not as much as I would like, but some of it will be there. So when we open a 1-to-4 contract, paragraph 1 is pretty simple. Who is buying and who's selling this property, right? So the parties of the contract. First, we type in the seller. Now, where would I find this information? I can go back to the MLS. And if I go down to, I think it's office and sales, maybe. I don't know where they put it on your guys' little thing. If you guys know, feel free to yell it out. I won't be mad at you. It's not insulting. It's actually helpful. Nope. Okay, let's just keep looking for it. I know where it is on mine. Yeah, the owners. Yeah, but where is it at? Don't be cheating over there. All right, Mark, don't cheat. It's there. So I'm going to tell you all the places. So here we go. So in the owner section, this is why I didn't recognize off the bat. She says see broker. For whatever reason, I'm not a big fan of that, but there could be something of the nature of this sale that's telling us what you see in BCAD, what you see in land.com, what you see in all these other places might not actually be accurate. There could be a corporate relocation involved where, yes, Carol's the actual owner of the property, but Cardis relocation will be the name actually on the contract because of her relocation agreement that she has. So if it does say see broker, I will usually go ahead and say, hey, Kat, you said, who are the owners of this? Now, there were a couple other little cheats that you could do, right? Like I said, you could go to BCAD and look it up that way, but that might not always be accurate. The one thing I like to do, which seems to always be pretty accurate, is who signed the seller's disclosure? because that should be pretty accurate, right? So if we're over here looking at Belclair and I come down and I get down to the last Douglas and Robin Aspie, there we go. I couldn't try that up. So that is a pretty good safe indicator that they're the ones who are probably actually the sellers onto it. So without having talked to Kat, this is what I'm going to do. Like I said, you could have gone and pulled up the tax information onto it. Now, if there's ever a underlined or highlighted field in the MLS, if you click on it, it's a hyperlink. So it'll open up additional information for you. So this is kind of like the MLS's version of the appraisal district information. So I can see Douglas Aspie, Douglas A. Aspie, and Robin A. Aspie as well. So I will take that over here on my other screen, come back to my screen here, and I will type in. And however, if there is an initial in, I'm going to include the initial, right? Even if they didn't sign it with the initial, I'm going to go ahead and include that over there. P. Tab to move to the next line. Do not write Douglas and Robin Aspie on one line. You want to give each individual their own lines. That way they have each their own individual signing line as well, right? Oops, looked away before I did anything. So I have Robin here. I think she was an A also, yep. I'm really curious what they're, I did it again, A-B-S-E-Y. And then you're going to put your client's name in here. Now, you should have known this already because you had a buyer's rep signed by them, but be careful. People don't always tell you their real name. If you had been showing me properties for the last month and it's time to write a contract for me, my name's not Alberto. My name's Fernando Alberto Hernandez. So I go by my middle name, right? You might be hanging out with Mike the whole entire time. He's actually Michael, right? Or Rich is actually Richard. Or my ex-wife, her name is Chrissy. It's not Christina. It's not Chrissy. It's not Christy. It's Chrissy. That's actually her legal name. So just make sure you know that, because once again, title is going to pull whatever's on this contract to reflect whatever's going to go onto the eventual deed and title later on. So make sure you're right. We'll get real creative and call them John Smith and Mary Smith. Now we talk about the information for the property. Once again, I could use that tax information. I can also go here and find the, maybe I can find the property information as well. Oh, I think it's up here in general. So it's in lot 29, block 11, and then it's also asking for the legal name of the subdivision. So I would copy and paste that and then just go 29, 11, boom. Now, in this section here where I typed in the subdivision information, sometimes people will put the full legal description in there. That's okay. Sometimes people put a CAN number or an NCB number in there, which is a county account number or national something block. Not really what it's asking for, but it's okay. If you're ever curious, if you click on this little question mark, property info, legal description, subdivision. It's telling you what should go in there right there. And that's all we're really looking for in that point. Once again, this is information so the title company can pull up the appropriate property and make sure all the title research is accurate. San Antonio is already in there. It's in the county of Bear. Mine was in my drop down because I've already written it multiple times. You would have to type it in. And then the address and zip code have attached itself already. Now, these next two paragraphs are probably two of the paragraphs that cost agents the most money. So we're going to read through them and make sure that you understand them fully. And it's improvements and accessories. So what is already an expectation that's going to convey with the house based on the fact that it's either attached to the house or it's an accessory that automatically comes with the house. And why I say this costs agents money all the time is because we allow our clients to make assumptions that certain things are going to convey or not convey, or that it was okay for them to take that from the house because they thought it was theirs and they could just remove it. So let's read through this real quick. The house, garage, and all other fixtures and improvements attached to the above described real property, including, without limitation, the following permanently installed and built-in items, if any: all equipment and appliances, balances, screens, shutters, awnings, wall-to-wall carpeting, mirrors, ceiling fans, attic fans, mailboxes, television antennas, mouse and brackets for televisions and speakers, heating and air conditioning units, security and fire detection equipment, wiring, plumbing, and lighting fixtures, chandeliers, water softener system, kitchen equipment, garage door openers, clean equipment, shrubbery, landscaping, outdoor cooking equipment, and all other property attached to the above described real property. Accessories, the following described related accessories, if any: window air conditioning unit, stove, fireplace, screens, curtains and rods, blinds, window shades, draperies and rods, door keys, mailbox keys, above ground pool, swimming pool equipment and maintenance accessories, artificial fireplace logs, security system that are not fixtures, and controls for garage doors, entry doors are Other improvements and accessories. Controls include sellers' transfer rights to the software and applications used to access and control improvements or accessories, and hardware used solely to control improvements or accessories. Who needs a drink of water? So this TV in this room does not convey. The mount behind it does convey, right? If you walked into a listing presentation and you had this beautiful chandelier that was hanging over the dining room, and you're like, wow, that's really nice. And they're like, yeah, my grandparents had that in their house back in the old country, and we brought it here. It's our fourth house it's been in. We can't wait to install into our new home. We should take that down then now. That's pretty much what I'm going to say, because I don't want someone to fall in love with something that now that becomes a contention part of the offer, right? Or I'll be very explicit in my agent remarks that this does not convey, because unfortunately, we have a section in here for interior features for inclusions, but we have nowhere in here that says exclusions. So typically, if you're trying to exclude something as a listing agent for your seller, you have to come down here and put it in your agent remarks. So here, text cat lodge with questions, roof 2017, side fences replaced in the last 2 years, shed 23, kitchen 2025, consult offer instructions and sent offers to cat lodge, hire to obtain use survey. So there he told us, hey, that's going to fall on us. I don't use offer instructions anymore, because most of the things I'm going to say are going to be right here in my agent remarks, or there's going to be links within the body of the MLS for them to find that information. But she still went ahead and did it because she's a little extra like that, and I appreciate it for her. I appreciate that about her. Now, with all that being said, nowhere in here have I read that something's being excluded, right? So I'm going to come here and put a big old NA. Alberto does not like blanks, okay? So I like NAs where I'm not going to have anything there, so kind of get used to that as well. Now, the next we talk about sales price. We're going to make this real simple, guys. We're in a multiple offer situation, but we're not going to go crazy, and I just want my math to be easy, so we're going to offer $550 here as the full. I'm sorry, that would have been a cash offer. Take that back. So let's say we're doing a 10% down conventional loan, okay? So the first section is going to be the down payment, the cash portion I'm bringing to the table. So a $550,000 house with a 10% down payment would mean that my client is bringing $55,000. If I tab away from that, it asks me if any of these addenda are going to be part of this contract. Am I going to use a third-party financing addendum? Am I going to use a loan assumption addendum or the seller financing? Almost always, guys, you will be using the third-party financing addendum. On rare occasions, you may enter into something that has a loan assumption on there or a seller financing. Those are not common, but if you do come across opportunity like that, that's why my office is right there. We'll discuss how we do those, okay? Now, when I tab over, it's going to take me to B, which is asking what amount of money am I financing for this, right? So what's the finance portion of it? So it would be the 90% left over on my offer price. So if I was offering $550,000 and I'm putting down $55,000 down there, that means I would be left with $495, right? I was wanting for Arvin to say it out loud at one time, but that's okay. I'll just do it right now. I'll just do it myself. And then when we tab over, you'll see it adds the two numbers automatically for you. You cannot type into C if you did not notice that. You can only ever type in A. You can only ever type in B. Now, if this had been a cash offer, what would I have done? $550,000 in A, nothing in B. It would have all just popped up in C. Had this been for one of my veteran clients and I was making a VA offer, what would I have done? I would have probably left A blank because they were probably putting nothing down with a VA loan. And then everything would have gone into B, the 555 or the 550 in there, and boom, would have populated in C for me as well. Okay. We had an agent, I just reviewed theirs, and they were doing a VA loan, but they put it all into A. So I was like, are they doing a cash offer? Or are they doing a VA loan? That's two very different things right now. So be careful where you put those. Paragraph 4, I love because it talks about any leases that might be applicable to the property. But what I don't like is they didn't put anything on here that says not applicable. So first ask, are there any residential leases? Meaning is there a tenant currently living in the property? Now remember, a lease survives the sale of a property. So I can't just go kick a tenant out because I'm the new I'm the new owner on it. If they have a lease that says that's still their house for the next 6 months, I have to honor those 6 months that are left on that lease. And we would ask for a residential lease addendum. There would be some information we'd fill on that. Fixture leases, or let's say I walk in and I see a Culligan water softener. That's my red flag that's probably being a leased piece of material right there. Culligan doesn't sell them too frequently. They're almost always serviced, right? Who else? Sometimes like ADT, some of the security equipment you might have logged in. And on the MLS here in our interior descriptions, it'll tell you water softener owned, cool. It didn't say anything about security systems, if they were owned or if they weren't owned or things like that. Once again, some people think solar panels should have a fixture lease. And if you have one, okay, it doesn't hurt. It's a nice disclosure form. But in actuality, very few people lease solar panels. They buy them and are paying them off over time. And there's just simply a lien against the property until that loan is satisfied on them. Okay, so it's not really a lease. And then the last one, which will very rarely happen, natural resources leases. No one's has like an oil well or something like that on their house in the vineyard. So we don't have to really worry about that too much. So we would leave this blank in this scenario because nowhere on here did it indicate that there was a lease or anything else going on. Nothing says she didn't disclose it. No other items in there. And somewhere on here, it does actually say, is this property leased? I just don't know where it says. And this view over here, once again, I won't be mad at you if you yelled it out and said, there it is, Alberto. Okay, no one else knows either. All right. But it's in here somewhere. HOAs, no, days on market. There you go. Lease expiration, currently be leased. It's left blank. Now, hopefully that was not your laptop. Okay. So now we're talking about paragraph 5, earnest money and option fee. Who are we depositing stuff with, right? Now, if I go into her offer instructions, I'm going to take a wild guess and say she's told me who her escrow officer is. Title companies, preserve title over there at 4 Dominion Drive, building 2, all that fun stuff. So I'm going to take this over to this other screen so I can see it right now. Come back to my contract. Now, it used to be, we used to write the escrow officer's name in here. So if it was going to be Suzette Keller over at Old Republic, if it was going to be whomever at whatever place. Legal 1 and Legal 2 classes now are saying no longer write an escrow officer's name in there, write the actual title company's name in there. So I'm going to go ahead and write, who was it? Preserve? I've never heard of these guys. Preserve title. Must be some new little startup. And then it's asking for the address because back in the day, we used to actually deliver checks to these places. And so I would need to know, where am I delivering this check? Like, where am I taking it to, right? What was it? Building 2. Building 2. In San Antonio. 78257. And you'll see it populated in that line for me at this point. Now, the first question is asking, how much earnest money am I going to deposit as this buyer? Typical for our market, it's 1%. So $5,500 in this case. Can it be less? Sure. Can it be more? Always. But do keep in mind, while it's not necessary, right? You don't have to have earnest money to have an executed or receipted contract. In reality, you need to have earnest money, right? No seller's going to accept that with being like, all right, cool, I hope you make it or not. You know what I mean? No, they want the buyer to have some skin in the game. So we'll put $5,500 here. And then the next one is asking is, what are you going to be willing to pay in an option fee? So how much money are you going to put down for that option? Now, for the longest time in our market, it was $10 a day, $100 bought you 10 days, right? That was just for years and years, that's what it was. Then COVID happened. 21 and 22 and 23 happened, and sellers were not taking their house off the market for 10 days in that market for only $100. And so we started seeing $250, $500. I had a client write $1,000 option check one time, just trying to get under contract, right? Because the option fee is at risk, meaning that if they decide to terminate the contract, that money is automatically released to the seller. So, but if they don't, it does get applied to the purchase price of the home. So we've kind of come back around, and I am seeing $100 a lot more, especially on my lower price properties. $100 has come back. as a buyer's agent, I usually counsel 250. I say 250 is a fair number. It's not so huge that, gosh, I'm not going to be able to feed the kids this week if I lose that 250, but it's also so not so insignificant that a seller may kind of scoff at it and be like, ugh, I'm not going to lose 10 days. So I would say 250 is fair. And also, I always tell people, yeah, you could lose this money, but are we writing this contract to cancel it? No, we're writing this contract. So our expectation is to purchase this home and get to the closing table, right? So that's not really my mindset of, oh, we're going to lose this money if we terminate, right? I don't ever go into a contract thinking we're going to terminate. Some properties, but very rarely. Now, this next section in A1 is asking you if you're going to deliver additional earnest money at a later date. Now, why would we ever do this? My old GRI professor, Pat Strong, rest in peace, she gave us two great scenarios. What if I am in a competitive offer situation, right? And I want to say, listen, I'm putting 10% down anyways, that's $55,000. So I'm going to give you $5,500 right now. And then on day 11, after my option period expires, I'll give you another $5,500 just to show you how serious I am that we're going to get to the closing table. Essentially saying my client now has $11,000 at risk right now, which is going to be more than what most people are willing to do, right? So that was one way. Another is the opposite of that. What if I'm not very confident in this property and I'm afraid that once we get into the inspections, we're going to find all those, skeletons in the closet that we were concerned about. So maybe I only gave $1,000 initially as my earnest money, but I'll give you the other $4,500 after my option period expires on day 11, right? Now, both make logical sense. I only wrote one up one time where I was trying to get additional money back in the crazy days, trying to get, property under contract. It actually still wasn't accepted. So usually what I'm going to do is I'm just going to write NA in these and leave them blank. So almost every other contract, it's always just been a blank in there. So type in NA and then NA again. Are you able to do that? If you are, you know a trick that most other people don't. If you're trying to write letters in a numerical field, if you remember one thing from this class, remember this. Spacebar, NA. This is already a lettered field, so you can write letters in there. But if you're trying to write letters where only numbers are allowed, click the spacebar, it'll change it a funny little color, and then you can write it in there. Remember that. Because someone's going to say, Alberto, I can't write this. And I say, did you hit the space bar? And then I go, okay, now I can write it. Now, here in B, we're talking about the number of days we're asking to have our option. So 10 is typical. On a property like this, 10 is more than sufficient. I wouldn't get much less than 7. Sometimes people try to do really low days to try again to entice, hey, look how great my offer is, right? But you got to give everyone adequate time to do their inspections. And then even after you've done your inspection, you got to give the seller some time to review that amendment request and then maybe get pricing on what repairs are going to cost and how they want to proceed, right? Now, had this property been all the way out there in the country and it had a well and it had a pool, it had a septic system, I might ask for 12 or 15 days instead, because in order to coordinate all these various inspections and because it's a little bit more of a rural property, I may have gone ahead and asked for a little bit more, understanding I might have to pay a little bit more also to get those times. But 10 days is pretty fair across the board. Now, the rest of this paragraph really talks about the delivery of the earnest money and the option fee. And this is important to note, guys. You have 3 days to deposit the earnest money and option fee in order for them to be effective. Now, if I was to execute a contract today, it's Friday, right? Day 1 is Saturday, day 2 is Sunday, day 3 is Monday. It's due by 5 p.m. on Monday. But let's backtrack a little bit. Let's say I executed this contract on Wednesday. Day 1 would be Thursday. Could do it then. Didn't do it. Uh-oh. Day 2 is Friday. Did it then. Didn't do it. Uh-oh. Day 3 can't fall on a weekend or a legal holiday. So even though Saturday counts and even though Sunday counts, day 3 actually becomes Monday on that. And it's important to keep that in mind because if your client, and hopefully you had this conversation when you did your buyer consultation about upfront expected costs, sir, or ma'am, you're going to have to be ready to pay for an inspection report. Your appraisal will probably be charged to you by your lender up front, so they'll probably just put that on a credit card, so just be aware of that. And then also you're going to have money set aside for your earnest money deposit and for your option fee deposit. So make sure you have that cash on hand and readily available. No problem, Alberto. That's all sitting in my checking account ready to go. Oh, you know what? Shoot, that's over in a money market account that I got to be able to move over and do this and do that. I like to have these conversations early so the expectation is that I'm not trying to liquidate some asset or some savings account to try to get that money. It's going to take me 3 days for it to clear when this clock's already started on me at this point right now. So it's an important thing to note. Title policy, paragraph 6, who's going to pay for the title policy? We're back in the market as such that usually the seller will pay for the title policy, an expected closing cost that they'll have. So I would select seller, and then I would write that preserved title back in there because, right, that's who it was. Yeah, preserved title as a person to issue it. And you'll see, once again, it's just because I've done this a lot. There's a lot of other title companies. Once you start typing these in, they'll populate for you, right? That's why I've never heard of preserved title. That's why it's nowhere in my drop down. Now, when we get to 8, the standard printed exception as to discrepancies, conflicts, shortages in area or boundary lines, encroachments or protrusions or overlapping improvements, I will not be amended or deleted from the title policy, or I will be amended to read shortages in area at the expense of either the buyer or the seller. Who knows what that means? Don't feel bad. I could ask most of this office and they still wouldn't know what that means either. If for some reason this little section confuses people more than anything else. So let's backtrack and talk about the title policy first off. What is a title policy? It's an insurance policy saying that Carol can sell this house to Marquise, and if in the future Marquise wanted to sell this house, he could sell it to Hav, and Hav wouldn't get in trouble for it, right? Because all those chain of ownership has happened. Carol's ex-husband didn't pop up all of a sudden and say, nah, that's my house. You know what I mean? So they've cleared the title, the chain of ownership from one person to the next, all the way apparently back to the Spanish land grant, what they always say, but I don't really believe that. But that no one else has a claim to this property, right? What it doesn't guarantee, though, is the actual boundary lines and portions of the property, meaning that if Carol had, I'll give you an actual real world example. When my sister bought her house up in Bulverde, she wanted acreage. She was left here in Stone Oak. And she wanted to have chickens and a dog run and all this other stuff, right? Chickens are all dead, so it doesn't really matter. But back then it was her dream to have them, right? And so she bought a little over 2 acres from this lady house, nice big yard. At one point, the lady had owned the lot next door to her, but had sold that as well. But she had fenced in her property. And luckily, while we were under contract, because she did not have a current survey, we ordered a new survey. And at that time, we realized at about 60 feet in, that fence started to veer this direction. And at its widest, it was a 16-foot pie shape at the very back. So when she had fenced it, she had owned both properties, and they just found the natural line of the yard to kind of like let it fence in, because then every party had a big slope to it, right? But we no longer own that anymore. She was selling us a portion that wasn't there. And had that been discovered after the fact, right, without having this rider in place to offset the title policy, that expense and that dispute would have fallen onto those 2 parties at this point, as opposed to us making a claim and saying, hey, it turns out this is wrong. We need to go and fix this. Now, usually if I'm in that scenario where I was ordering a brand new survey, I probably wouldn't add this on, right? Because at the time of closing, I'm going to know, do we have any issues before I ever get to closing? And I've already been told by Kat, what? Buyer's going to have to get a new survey. Now, is this expensive? It isn't. It's 5% of the overall title policy. And the title policy on a property like this, off the top of my head, I would say probably be a little over $4,000, probably like $4,200 or so for a title policy on this property for this value. And if you're really curious, you can type in title policy calculator. It'll tell you exactly what the cost is, but they're usually a little bit under 1% after you get over $300,000. Now, with that being said, 5%, let's say it's a $4,000 title policy, $400 is 10%, $200 would have been the addition onto it, right? That's 5%. That's how I did my math real quick. Everything by 10%ers. So it's not a huge expense. And so if I really, really want that peace of mind, sure, I could throw it on there, but I know I'm going to get a new survey. It's a production neighborhood. The vineyard has been sitting there since the mid-90s. So it's not like I have to really worry too much about fence lines have moved and things have. So the places I worry about it is when I get inside 410, because even though those are even older, all that stuff has moved around so much, and someone claimed this and lived here and lived that, and fence lines, you look at it from like the satellite views and everything's off all the time. Or if I'm getting rural and I'm getting anything over like a half acre, especially anything over an acre, I might add it, unless once again, I have a new survey that tells me differently. Make sense? So in this scenario, I would say will not be amended and we're good. Now the survey, so usually I'd be asking, hey, Mr. Seller, give me the existing survey that you have and we'll review it. And if it's still good, great, we all save money at that point. Kat has openly said the buyer will be responsible for a new survey. Now, just because she says it, doesn't mean I have to listen to her. I can still say, nope, I want the seller to pay for a new survey. You know what? I'm giving you full asking price. Actually, I'm giving you, what is it, like $1,000 more than full asking price because I offered $550. I want you to go ahead and just pay for that survey, you know, and go from there. So that wouldn't be an unreasonable request, but you know, she scares me. I'm just going to let my buyer pay for it. And I'm going to ask now, the amount of days I'm going to ask for it to get delivered is a little bit longer than normal, right? Because I'm not going to order a survey by day 5 on a 10-day inspection or 10-day option period that turns out I might not move forward with this house. So I'll usually give myself about 15 days, because once I know I'm moving forward with the contract, say day 9, day 10, something like that, then I'm going to reach out to the survey company and say, hey, we need a survey ordered for my client at this point. Title companies will often help you with the order of a survey, but you can do that, or you can put it onto your client to say, hey, we need a survey ordered. Most surveyors now do require payment up front. It used to be for the longest time, they got paid at closing, and then for the longest time, they kept on getting screwed at closing and not getting their money. So now there are a lot of them are like, nope, we want to get paid up front. Now, had we asked the seller to do it, we would have done the same thing. We just chosen 3 though, and I probably would have made the days lower. I probably would have said like 7 days, because ideally I'd like to have seen it sooner than later. And it wouldn't have been a big deal, because if we did terminate the contract, the seller now has a brand new survey that they can give to people. So however you want to negotiate. Now in D, we place objections. Oftentimes you will see the words residential use written here, and that's 100% okay. Feel free to do it. However, once again, Pat Strom, my old GRI professor, she would say, well, Alberto, what kind of contract are you writing? 104 residential contract. So then why are you stating residential use? It's kind of a redundant statement, is it? And I'd say, yes, you are, Pat. I won't do it anymore, I promise. So I usually write not applicable unless there is something that my client specifically wants to do with that house that doesn't involve just living there, right? So they want to operate their law office out of the front room. They're a therapist. The lady I lived across the street for 3 years, I thought she just had a lot of grandchildren. Turns out she was running a daycare out of the place the whole entire time. Until I got up one day, I was like, huh. This makes no sense. And like car after car after car kept the driving. I was like, oh, these are all someone's kids right there. So she was running a daycare. Now, should she have? Did she get legal permission? Probably not, but she was doing it anyways, you know. But if that was something she wanted to be certain of, that there were no deed restrictions against that, this is where she would have written in there. But usually it's going to be residential use or NA. And then you do want to put a number of days on here. I just reviewed a contract this morning where they forgot to put a number of days. This does not have to be a huge number. 3, maybe 5 days. And what we're requesting here is I want 5 days that once I receive that title policy, that my client has 5 days to object on anything on this title policy. When you receive that title policy the first time, it's confusing. It's a lot of blah, 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 blah. Really where we want to go is to section C of it, where it talks about any liens and encumbrances against the property. And typically you're going to see the mortgage that's owed to the property. So you'll see that on there, or at least who is the lien holder. It won't be the dollar amount, but it'll say, you know, Wells Fargo, boom, this amount here. But I want to see, are there mechanical liens against the property? Is there someone with a similar name that has claim to it? Is there, you know, I only have these guys on there, but there's a third name saying that they might own the property at that point. Now, the objection doesn't have to be resolved within 5 days, but my client has to raise the objection within 5 days, given the opportunity to say, hey, I want this cured before we're going to move towards closing. I will tell you now, guys, most times, I probably jinxed all of you, I apologize, this will never become an issue. You know, I'm sure I will just curse you all now with having some random crazy title policies in your first few deals, but usually this is not a very big issue. I ran into it once where we were in a short sale situation. We had accounted for the mortgage, and then suddenly it popped up they never paid for their pool. So there's a $40,000 lien still sitting against their pool. That was not going to be sufficient. And the only way they could do it was to carry the lien over to my clients. And my clients are like, no, we're not paying for that pool. You know, so luckily we found that when we researched the title. Yes, sir.
If you're out of your office and you find an issue in your title policy.
Yeah, because your title policy won't usually be issued within the 10 days. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of things that still allow you to get out of a contract that don't involve your option period. We're going to talk about each of them, but that is one of them. Yes, for sure. Now here in E2, it's asking, is this property in a mandatory membership in a property association, or is it voluntary? This one is, and I know that by a couple ways. A was disclosed in the seller's disclosure, right? But also in the MLS, it says here, HOA mandatory. It also says there aren't multiple HOAs, which is really cool. Because if I was buying a house over here in like Sonterra, or if I was buying a house, yeah, there's 3 in Sonterra. If I was buying a house over in Rogers Ranch, there's going to be at least 2. A lot of neighborhoods, they'll have like a general HOA, like in this instance, Stone Oak is a general HOA for a lot of this area. And then the individual neighborhoods will have their own HOAs. So if that was the case, it would have said multiple HOA and it would have said yes. And they would have listed both or all 3 of them or whatever the number is right here. But this one, we don't have to worry about one. Now, we'll select is, and you could read through this whole paragraph, but what really matters is at the very end, it says, if buyer is concerned about these matters, the TREC promulgated addendum for property subject to mandatory membership in a property association should be used. We're going to scratch out that word should, and here as a brokerage, I'm going to tell you will be used. This is not an optional document. If your property that either your client's purchasing or that you're listing has an HOA, we require that you use the HOA addendum. All right. So that is not an option. And the reason I say that is because you might get some pushback on some old school broker who's like, we don't need that, Alberto. I know how the property code reads. My buyer's fully aware of their responsibilities. Da, da, da. Okay, cool. Select that anyways. And select that. And I'll show you on the document because we're going to cover it today. We'll choose option 4 and we'll all just move on. Right. Now, the rest are a bunch of disclosures, statutory tax district, tidewaters. Remember, this contract covers the state of Texas. So while these might not be applicable for the property that we're going under contract with, they may be applicable in other parts of the state. Here under required notices, if this property had something that it had to disclose beyond just the seller's disclosure, this is where it would go. So if it was in a PUD, a MUD, a PID, a PUD, all these improvement district places, this is where the seller would disclose that. Vineyard does not have any of those applicable to it. So I'm going to put in a big ol' NA. Now, property conditions. So access, inspections, utilities, seller shall permit buyer and buyer's agents access to the property at reasonable times. Hate that term. What's reasonable to Carol might be totally unreasonable to me. Maybe she's like a super night owl and I like to go to bed early. I don't know. I'm not letting you inspect my house at midnight. Buyer may have the property inspected by inspectors selected by buyer and licensed by TREC or otherwise permitted by law to make inspections. Any hydrostatic testing must be separately authorized by seller in writing. Seller at seller's expense shall immediately cause existing utilities to be turned on and shall keep the utilities on during the time this contract is in effect. So do you have to have your electric and your water on while you're showing the property? Technically, no. But once you go under contract, that stuff has to be turned on. And I will tell you right now, no one wants to see a house without air conditioning turned on. We're hitting those months here where it becomes really unbearable really quickly. I'm seeing you in a sweater and you're making me sweat right now. But anyways, so you will have some investor clients who are like, oh, the tenants moved out, all utilities got turned off. We're just going to leave it that way, Alberto, until someone buys this, right? No, sir, you really want to go and turn that on because no one's going to look at your house when it's 90 degrees in there. It's just too uncomfortable. And anyways, once you go under contract, they have to be turned on so that people can do their inspections properly anyways. Now, in this case, we have received the seller's disclosure. It was attached in the additional document. So I'm going to select number 1. I'm going to provide that to my buyer so that they can review it and initial it. Had she not done that, I would have had to select number 2, and I would have given her a number of days to deliver that to me. Now, back in the COVID years, people were being really cute. They were waiving their option fee, right? They were saying, oh, no option period. But you know what? Give me, I'll give you, and I'll even give you 7 days to give me the seller's disclosure. Don't worry about it, man. I really appreciate it. We really want to get this house. What they were doing is they were creating themselves an option fee, an option period without having to pay for one. Because if you don't deliver the seller's disclosure at contract and they receive it 3 days, 5 days, 7 days later, they have 7 days to review that seller's disclosure and then determine whether or not they want to terminate the contract. So this was a lot of people were trying to be cute with this, which is why on my listings, it says in my agent remarks, we will only be submitting offers that have a signed seller's disclosure attached to it. So I've always included my seller's disclosure. It's part of every one of my, one of my associated documents, and don't try to get cute and try to send me one without it and knowing that I know what you're trying to do later. I'm smarter than you, so it's tough, even if I'm not. And then number 3, the seller is not required to furnish a notice under the Texas Property Code. These are pretty rare. So executors of an estate sale, right? The executor is not required to do so. If we're selling through familiar property, so sadly, Carol and I have divorced. I'm giving her the property. I don't have to give her a seller disclosure because it's a familiar relationship in that regard, right? New construction, same thing. I don't have to do as a new construction, no seller disclosure required there. Bank foreclosure. I own the house. I had tenants in it the whole entire time. I've never lived there. That's not a valid excuse. You are still the owner of the property. You still need to disclose the time you fix the AC system or the time that you replace the roof as the property owner. That is not a valid excuse. So lack of owner or lack of occupancy is not a valid excuse. Now in D here, accepting the property as is or under these treatments, almost always it's going to be as is. This does not mean that if the AC doesn't work or if the roof turns out to be missing shingles, you can't negotiate that under an option period. It just means I'm not expecting you to do anything else to this property as of right now. Now, I've gone under contract on a property where there was hail damage and there was an open claim and they openly said, we're replacing the roof on this date, but I'm going under contract now. I'm going to include, I expect the roof to still get replaced by this date. That it's not something I'm just saying, oh, no, don't worry about it. We don't need a roof. We're good. I had clients who were buying a house and they had this big, huge play system in the backyard, like $2,000. They call it the Gorilla Play System or something like that. My client's youngest son was 16 years old. He wasn't out there on the swings anymore, and so they didn't want that in the backyard. It was a big eyesore for them. Sellers didn't really want to remove it, but we were trying to say, hey, this is where we'd put it. Ended up in my backyard. I ended up moving and saying, cool, I need that. My kids were young, so it worked out really well for me. But it would be things like that. This is also where you'd put in if I had excluded, let's say, my TV mounts, or for instance, right now we have an agent going under contract and they're saying we're taking our water softener with us, right? Well, then they want any damage that's done. If I whip out these TV mounts, here in 2 is where I would say, well, then I want the holes to be patched, textured, and painted to match the existing wall because I don't want to show up to a house with big old holes in there, right? So if it's a specific request, this is where you would put it. Usually though, oops, wrong one, for dramatic effect, as is. Lender required repairs, usually we won't know about those until appraisal happens, right? And understand that lender required repairs aren't necessarily seller required repairs. Now, yes, does the seller the one who usually ends up doing it? Probably. But it could also be the seller just says, nope, I'm not doing that. Like, let's say I have a veteran offer on there, a VA offer, and there's wood rot around the exterior of the property, which is not going to pass the VA appraisal, but the seller's like, I got no money, I got no time, I'm not doing it. The buyer, they could pay for it. Agents, they can pay for it, or they can just terminate the contract. The buyer will get back their earnest money. They'll still lose their option fee. They'll still lose any appraisal costs they have in there. And the seller will have to know going forward, I guess I can't sell to a veteran because my property's not going to pass the VA loan at that point. So we can't force someone to do it, but you also can't force the buyer to move forward. Now, completion of any repairs, important to note on this is that the repairs have to be done by licensed individuals if a license is required, right? I call myself an amateur plumber. 2 water heaters, like 5 toilets, lots of sinks. I've done all these on my own. I feel pretty confident going into most plumbing situations, but I am not a plumber. So if I was to receive a repair request that they wanted the toilet replaced, I can do that with my eyes closed. But since I'm not a licensed plumber, I'd have to say, hey, is it okay that the homeowner does this? Or if I was the homeowner, that I do this, right? Otherwise, now, patching that wall, do I need a license to do a patchwork, right? No, but it does say I have to be commercially engaged in that in that type of aspect. So even if you have the most handy dad in the world who can do all this stuff, right? Unless that is their job, they're not allowed to do that unless you have written permission from both parties saying that it's okay for them to do that. Like if I have a running toilet, I'm not going to pay a plumber $150 an hour to go out there and replace a little valve on there. I'm just going to go to Home Depot and spend $12 and do it myself. So there's certain things you want to keep in mind, but otherwise, if it's not stated, it does require a license or a professional. H is talking about residential service contracts. We call these home warranties all the time. When Debbie Blackerby comes up here singing her little songs, talking about American Home Shield, this is what we're referring to. Now, what dollar amount do you think we should throw in there, guys? Anyone? Pick a number. Don't be scared. You were selling houses back in the 80s. So, yeah. So the best thing you can do, right, is familiarize yourself with the various plans that are out there. We have brochures in the back of the market room for American Home Shield because that's our preferred home warranty company. I ain't being recorded. There's plenty out there. So there's Old Republic, there's National Fidelity, there's a bunch of different home warranty companies out there. And usually, while American Home Shield is always my top choice to refer to people, I will ask them, do you have a home warranty company in mind? Or would you like for me to give you a few options? And even then I will say, here's American Home Shield, here's Old Republic, here's this. Now they all cost about the same. They've all gone up exponentially, where I was joking. When I started this business, $375 was a home warranty for you, right? That would even get you the basic problem now, a basic plan right now. Usually about $650 is a pretty safe number. And even then, that's still probably like a middle tier plan. And if I was to add on to a pool or a septic system or a well, if I wanted those items covered in my home warranty, those are all typically additional riders I'm having to add on. So about $650 would probably be a fair number, but I would say go take a look at it. Now, does that mean your client can't order a $750 home warranty plan? No. It just means that the seller is only going to contribute up to this amount, right? And sometimes in offer instructions or in agent remarks, you'll see someone say, seller is willing to contribute up to $600 to a home warranty or up to this price, meaning that this is our limit. Because I think here again, it's not even that impressive anymore. Back in the day, I used to say my most expensive home warranty was $895, right? And that had a pool and a well and a base plan, but that was back when the base plans were in like the 500s. So that's why I say you can easily get to $1,000 pretty quickly now with today's prices on home warranties. Now, A8 is asking, is anyone a licensed agent? Now, I can look here and over here where it says owner LREA or LREB, and it says no. That's just simply stating, is the owner a licensed real estate agent or a licensed real estate broker? And the answer is no, they are not, right? If any of you were to purchase a property, you have to disclose that you are a licensed agent. If you were to be selling a property, same thing. But in this case, John and Mary Smith are not licensed agents, and neither are the Aspies, right? That was their name. So I will put a big old NA in there as well. Now, who picks the closing date? Or what should we put for a closing date? You guys are such a vocal group. Slow down. Let me point at someone.
45 days after Sunday.
45 days is the number?
30?
30s? If that 30 is fair, Christina? That's a good answer there. So the closing date, guys, right? There is no specific answer because it is a negotiable item. However, you're right. There are certain things that you want to kind of keep in mind. Usually that 30 to 45 days is about the normal number that we throw out there. But be logical about it, right? If 30 days from now is a Saturday, that's obviously not what you're going to put on there, right? It has to be a Monday through Friday, no working days. But also, I like to close midweek, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Why? Because if I'm closed on a Monday, no one's done anything for the last 2 days. It's in the weekend. And if I'm closed on a Friday and something goes sideways and we got to extend for a day, we're not extending to the next week as well. So if possible, close Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. However, if you know your client is only off work on Mondays, I'm going to probably close on a Monday because I'm not going to try to make them leave work. But have a conversation. Marquise, are you traveling at all right now? Do you have vacation plans? Oh yeah, because you pick a closing day. It's like, oh hey, I just remember we're going to be in Mexico. Is that going to be a problem? Kinda. We kind of need you here to close. You know what I mean? So have that conversation. And it's a conversation I would have had already with Kat. Not necessarily like super strict, but it would have been one of those things where I would have been asking, is there a preferred closing date? Do you guys need something in particular? Mainly because I'm trying to use that as a, hey, I'll give you exactly what you want because I might want something else over here, right? That's how we kind of negotiate with that. But let's say we'll do 30 days. Now, don't count 30 days from today because unless I set this over, she accepted today and we execute it tomorrow, more than likely I'm going to have to probably put a couple days beyond that 30, right? 2 or 3 days for negotiation purposes. So if we're on the 5th of June now, well, July 4th is a holiday. That's a Saturday anyways, but I know they're recognizing the holiday on the Friday beforehand. So I know Friday would be a dead day. And since the 6th, that means no one's working since the 2nd. I know no one's going to do that. So I would probably just go smack dab right into the 8th right here. Now, personally, I don't know why it's doing that now. Personally, if this was really me, this was really Alberto traveling, I'm out of town. So I may actually pick the following week. And you know what? Let's close on my birthday. That's fun. Why is it doing that? That's weird. There we go. I'll have a closing on my birthday. That'd be a great birthday gift. A little $15,000 commission's a good way to celebrate 50. And we'll do that there, right? Possession, you're almost always going to select upon closing and funding. If the seller needs to lease it back for a period of time, you do according to a temporary lease. If your buyer is moving in early, you would do a temporary lease. Talk to us about those if that's an instance on how to navigate the rent and the possession of that. It's a little bit different. You'll see in my template, I always have NA already written into special provisions because you should not be writing anything into special provisions. And if you're ever asked to write anything in special provisions, I always want that cleared by management before it goes in there. Even if the other party is saying, write this in special provisions, you will still clear that with management before you write anything in special provisions. It's real tempting to play lawyer. I love it. I'm not gonna lie to you, but we're not lawyers. So don't do anything that you shouldn't do. Now, 12 is where the big change is happening, guys. All right. 12 is going to look entirely different here pretty soon. And essentially it's going to be, this is where we're requesting our commission as a buyer's agent, right? And then this is also where we might request any closing cost assistance towards our buyer for their loan costs or for their other escrow costs. So maybe the upfront funding fees, maybe their escrow accounts, things like that, that they might have an additional to their down payment. So In this case right now, this first line, which is going to go away, is talking about our commission. If my buyer's rep has a 3% commission on there, that is where I would write my 3% on there. Your buyer's rep should say 3%. We don't take lower than that unless for unique circumstances. And then C would be where I'd be asking for closing cost contribution to my buyer's other expenses, upfront escrow accounts, funding fees, loan origination fees, things like that. I am, in a normal scenario, a big believer in if I can get you to cover the cost of some of my buyer's closing costs, I'd rather do that than try to negotiate a really low sales price. Why? Because one is cash in my bank I have right now. The other is incremental payments I'm going to have over the next 30 years for a house that I'll probably own for 7 or 8, because that's about the typical time most people own their houses. So if I can take $10,000 off that $550 and get the house under contract at $540, or if I can leave it at $550 and get $10,000 in my client's closing costs covered, I'd probably ask for the $10,000 in closing costs. Why? Because I'd rather have that $10,000 in my bank so I could redo the appliances in the kitchen that I didn't like, or so I could finish this improvement, so I can go on vacation to Mexico next week, or whatever the case I wanted to do, right? So I'm gonna write $10,000 in here. Now, talk to your lender, find out what makes the most sense for your client, talk to your client, and then you'll figure out your loan, your offer structure based off of that. Once again, we're going to cover that kind of strategy a little bit more in week 4 of your momentum. Proration is pretty straightforward. Seller pays for what they has, as long as they've owned the property. Taxes, buyer's responsible for the rest. Casualty or losses doesn't have to be extreme as the house burning down. Here in San Antonio, unfortunately, it's a lot of hailstorms. You're under contract, hailstorm comes in. Now the buyer has an option. They can actually exit the contract because the house isn't in the condition it was, but the seller does have an opportunity to cure the situation by replacing the roof. They can actually extend things, I think, up to 15 days if necessary to get everything straightened out. At that point, it's really nice having a brother in roofing because it's happened to me more than once, so works out well. Either party defaults, what's going to happen? Mediation. So we're always disclosing that we're going to mediate any issues first before we go to the courts. And then escrow. The important thing to note is that the escrow agent is not a party to this contract. They're simply a facilitator of the contract. They are taking in certain monies and they're distributing monies at the end, but they're not actually part of the contract. And if one party makes a demand of the other that, hey, I want the earnest money released to me, both parties have to be in agreement in order for the escrow officer to do that, unless one party does not object and the other party's made the request and a 15-day period has gone by. If the other party never objects to it, then the earnest money can be released. I will tell you, even then, even though that is exactly what it says in the contract, most title companies are still hesitant to do it because they're trying to avoid that liability of, oops, we gave away the money, right? Federal requirements. So this is something to disclose whether or not the seller is a foreign person. Don't always make assumptions. The only foreign person I almost got caught with was Canadian. So it had nothing to do with the Spanish name. So be careful what you're assuming. Now you'll see I went ahead and just write my email address there. It should be there, but you do want to include your client's email addresses. I know I've done a John Smith in my past. Oh, I did a John. Oh, there he is, John Smith. And I include always both parties if I have both parties' email addresses. So that way both can say you both got that information. And I don't want to be the one solely responsible for any correspondences from the title company pertaining to this contract. So I always will include my client's email addresses. As you'll see, I did not include their phone number or their address because I don't necessarily want communication to start to happen between the two parties. However, I will tell you right now, I have a client, my nephew, we were trying to track down the original sellers of his house that he bought 2 years ago because of some solar panels, trying to figure out who actually installed them. They did have their phone number on there. So it made it really convenient because the dang listing agent suddenly called me back 2 weeks later. So even though I've called her 3 times. So it was nice that the actual seller did respond to my text message. Well, didn't respond to my phone call, responded to my text message saying, sorry, we didn't install the solar panels. We also bought them from someone else at that point. USAA won't give my client the $300 on his insurance claim to remove the solar panels to be able to put the roof on because he can't prove that they don't have that he paid them off, even though he never paid them off. It was an existing lien. Even though title policy says it's clean, we're not too happy with USAA right now. Now here, I don't know unless it was in my offer instructions, which we'll pull back over here real quick and I'll take a look here. I don't know my client's email address. I'm sorry, I don't know the seller's email addresses. I just see their names here. She didn't include that, which is not uncommon, right? But I do have Kat's email address, so I will, let's see if that works. I think I can actually copy it differently. As a courtesy, nope, that didn't work. I will go ahead and copy her email address in and put that in there for her. So that way it's one less thing she has to write later on. Because it's easy for me to edit this document because I'm the one filling it in. It's a little harder for her. Now, what you can do as a listing agent, if you did receive this and you want to include your seller's email addresses, when you're sending off for signature, you would just put a little text field in there and type in their email address. Pretty simple. Now here we're going to select all the addenda that are part of this contract: third-party financing, addendum for property subject to mandatory membership in a property association, addendum concerning right to terminate due to lender's appraisal, because this is a conventional loan. And nothing else is applicable, but we are going to ask for that fridge. So I'm going to put the non-realty addendum in there as well. Now, they would probably like for us to go ahead and do what as well? What other little document that they wanted us to put in there? Remember when we were here, they also had that KSIR notice to buyers. So I know that their brokerage asked that to be part of the contract. So I could include that as well. So KS, was it IR notice to buyers. So now both those addenda are also part of the contract as well. Had I put lead paint isn't part of this. Lead paint is, on-site sewer isn't part. So those are other things I might include in the contract if necessary, right? Now, I've already defaulted to say no attorneys will be involved, preferably. So that's like my little go-to, none select at this time. They may include something on their own. We don't fill in the execution date until all parties are signed, so that's going to be left blank. Here you confirm that you've typed in your seller and buyer's names correctly, so they should be on their own individual signature lines. If you had more than 2 people buying or selling a property, you would have to include 2 names on one section. So occasionally you might have 3 sellers, you might have 3 buyers. So always include 1 on one and then 2 on the other. It just won't allow you to tag it as easily later on when we go for signature. Now, for training purposes, I'm going to skip this, but normally I'd come over here and I would put all of Kat's information. Cooper Sotheby's, do this. And once again, that's where these offer instructions are super helpful because it's all right here for us, right? She has listing agent, supervisor, all that information I would need for that is all listed here for her. I'm not going to do this now so we can move on to the other addendum, but as a courtesy, and once again, to show that you're a professional, take the time to do it. It is one of my biggest telling factors. If I receive an offer, especially if I saw more than one offer and they're relatively the same, I will tell my client, I want to work with this agent. I don't want to work with this agent because this agent does their job. This one's lazy. Plain and simple. Might be a little harsh, but that's actually how I feel. Now, it's a little confusing because if you were doing an intermediary, so let's say I was under Carol had a listing and I put an offer on hers, I would actually leave everything on the left blank and then everything would be on the right because we'd be working as an intermediary. And Carol's information would be on the top and my information would be down below as the selling associate. So selling associate is synonymous with buyer's agent. Those are the exact same thing. I was back from a time when we didn't have buyer's representation. You only had a listing agent and then a selling agent, and the selling agent was a person who brought the buyer to contract. So they still call it a selling associate. Now at this point, I filled out my whole contract. I'm good. I hit this little save icon. That's a floppy disk for all my under 30s. And then we go over to save as PDF. If you hit save as PDF, I want to save this to my device, and then I hit save. And the reason I'm doing that, because I'm a new agent and I need managers to review this. And we're going to go through this all here really quickly. What you're going to do after you fill out all the documents, you're going to hit the little X on the right, hit continue because you filled out everything. You're going to keep doing that, save it as a PDF. And then eventually you're going to send an email to SA management that says, hey, I've just written an offer on whatever, Belclair, 1319 Belclair. Please review the attached documents for accuracy. I like to submit this to my client, today for signature. And then we're going to send, and then one of us is going to look at it 9 times out of 10. I'm going to be the one that looks at it because they all wait for me to do it. But anyways, and so now half hour goes by, hour goes by. No one's looked at it. Text me. I will tell you right now. Go ahead and text me. Give me an hour. Give me an hour. I might be in an interview. I might be doing something else, but text me. But don't send us, hey, here's I have a new listing or I have a new offer in 131 Belclair in my DocuSign room. Can you take a look at it? Right? Don't do that. Could we find it? Yes. It just makes it way more difficult. And if it's a Saturday, if it's the weekend, if it's in the evening, if I'm at home, it's super hard for me to look on my phone and try to figure out. But if I guess I'm old now. Let's say if I'm like my daughter's tennis match, and she's in college now, so she doesn't have tennis matches anymore. My go-to line. Half the time I'm sitting there on my phone reviewing your documents there. So now the other thing that you're going to do that John wants you to do, you're going to have a bunch of them, right? Don't send me a zip form or zip file of it with like 6 documents all into a zip file. Just send me individual PDFs and I'll look at it that way. Okay. So let's jump into third-party financing addendum. We'll knock out the rest of these in less than 30 minutes because they're all 2 pages or less.
To make sure I'm clear, you want us to save it off our device, send it to you that way. So we're out of the room at this point.
Yeah. And this is, you're going to compose an email. You're going to open up your email, essay management, and then just say, and now let us know if there's details. Hey, I know we should have done 1%. He only wanted to do $1,000 in earnest money, right? Because I'm going to look for mistakes or omissions, but I don't know the context of the offer. So I can't say this is good or this is bad. Sometimes, had I seen this and it was $450,000 and I'm at my desk, if I'm at my desk, I will always pull up the MLS, pull up the property you wrote the offer on and go back and forth between the two, right? But if I'm not, I don't know that the house is actually listed at 549 and your client's offering 450. So I may say, cool, good offer, guys, not knowing that your buyer's an idiot offering $100,000 underneath this price right now, right? So I will make certain assumptions that things are accurate unless you tell me differently within the body of your email. But I don't need to know, like, this is John and Mary Smith. They're moving from Colorado. They have 3 kids this size here. They really love this. I don't need all that stuff. and that's just giving the meat and potatoes, the relevant information, and we'll go from there. Now, in your third-party finance addendum, this is where you're going to select what type of financing your client's doing. You cannot have more than one. And you can't have a VA and an FHA. You're not going to have a conventional in this. You're going to have one type of financing. Now, in this case, we're doing conventional, so make sure you check your boxes. I don't know why. No one ever checks their boxes. Check the little box that has an X in there. And then we're going to be putting in the financed amount, not the sales price, the financed amount, which in this case was $495. For a loan to last for the full 30 years. We have 15-year mortgages and 30-year mortgages. They'll tend to be the 2 most common, but 30 years typically what you're going to do, with an interest not to exceed. Now, this does not have to be the exact number that your client's going to get, but it should be pretty close, and it should be in line with what today's market is. So if I wrote this offer to Cat and I wrote 4% in there, unless I'm in a time machine, that's not going to happen in today's world right now, right? Now, if I wrote 7% in there, Cat would be like, cool. Anyone can get a 7% interest rate right now because they're like in the low to mid 6s right now, right? So it should be in line with what's going on. If you're, that's 6, too many there, 6.5, I'm pretty safe there. Now, if my client, Greg, has a float down and it drops to 6%, cool. He's not obligated to 6.5. It's saying that I should be able to at least get this interest rate in order for me to move forward with the terms of this contract on it. Make sense? For 30 years, meaning that we're not having an arm or floating rate. It's going to be for 30 years with a 1% origination fee. Now, if they were doing a product where they were taking out a secondary loan, like when I bought one of my houses, I did what's called an 80-10-10. 80% primary loan, 10% secondary loan, 10% down payment. But that was because I was trying to avoid an upfront escrow account because in case you guys have not figured it out, your income will fluctuate month to month. So I wanted my payment to be as low as possible, not having to put money into my taxes and my insurance on a monthly basis, knowing that I have a separate account for that. And I just put that money in there. And at the end of the year, I just pay my taxes myself because some months I had, yay, $50,000 a month. Ooh, $1,000 a month. You know what I mean? So you want to kind of let that float around. But that's not too common. Like I said, it was unique to my financial situation. Texas Vet, FHA. Now, we're not writing FHA, guys, but make this note here because a lot of people will miss this. A Section 203B. That's the most commonly used type of FHA loan. It's a 203B. So in this word saying what kind, that's the kind you're writing, is a 203B. There is something called a 203K, which is their renovation loan, but once again, not too commonly used, but 203B is what you're gonna need there. VA and USDA, what's unique about both of those? Typically 0% down, right? We're financing the whole amount, so that part there. Reverse mortgage isn't very commonly used, and I think it's kind of predatory, so hopefully it's not used. And then other financing, this is now where we would write anything for like hard money loans. So it used to be we treated hard money loans like cash offers, but now most hard money lenders have their own series of underwriting and appraisal. So we would put that information there. Now you'll notice I've already pre-selected 20 days as my buyer approval. Yours is blank. You could put 21 in there. I wouldn't recommend putting less than 15. This is the amount of time your client has to get their final approval, right? And they may not have final approval right up until closing, but it's hard to get a listing agent to say, hey, I can terminate up to day 30 because my buyer didn't get it approved, right? So 21 is typically what we see in our market. I default to 20 to make it look just a little bit better than everyone else. That was my thought process behind it. But do what you like. Very rarely, and only like in 2 instances have I ever selected this contract is not subject to buyer obtaining approval. Now that's the cool one, right? If I say that, oh, my earnest money is at risk from day one because I don't care. That's how confident I am in my buyer purchasing this house. So make sure before you check that box that that's really the case. Like I said, I only did it. Well, I did it for the same agent or same client more than once, but she was a Air Force nurse, had her orders here, excellent credit, would never be denied a loan. I trusted that she was going to get there no matter what, you know. Other people, there are skeletons in closets that people know about, you know what I mean? Sometimes it's not even, I had a poor buyer lose my listing because it turns out, even though she was making more money as a part-time therapist or whatever she was, she hadn't been doing it long enough. And so the week of closing, second underwriting said, nope, we can't count your, additional overtime and stuff. Since you're part-time, we can only look back on what your standard pay is. You're no longer applicable for the loan. You're no longer approved for the loan. Really sad story. But my clients kept their earnest money and we put back on the market. So it was, and that's what was right. It sucked for her, but my clients had lost 25 plus days of marketing at that point. That is why earnest money is there. So it can happen. Shouldn't though, if these guys are doing their job right, which is why I like to use these guys. Paragraph 4. Now, if this was an FHA or VA loan, this is where I would write the $550,000 saying that the home has to appraise for the contract price. But this is not. This is a conventional loan. So that's why I have to have that separate document, buyer's right to terminate due to lender's appraisal, that we're going to fill out next. So I leave that blank and then signatures at the bottom. Same process, save here, save as a PDF to my device so that I can upload it to an email later on to management. Click download. And that will be the last one I'll download, so that way my download folder is not full of a bunch of documents I'm never going to use. Now, I said we're going to move to the buyer's right to terminate due to lender's appraisal. So let's find that one. Or addendum because we're right to terminate due to lender's appraisal. So this is what you use for conventional loans and USDA technically as well. Now, we have 3 options in this document: a waiver, a partial waiver, or the additional right to terminate. So a waiver says, I don't care what this house appraises for, I'm going to buy it no matter what, right? So that is obviously the power of a conventional loan, is that I'm not having to worry about it passing a appraisal later on, because technically I should have the money to go ahead and just move forward. Now, number 2 was used a lot back about 4 or 5 years ago during the craziness of our sellers market, because this house would have been listed at $550,000 and my client would have probably had to go in at around $600,000 to get it, right? That's about how crazy the market was for a period of time. So with that being said, what I was doing often in that time period is I would say, well, the house has to appraise for $550,000 and then we'll make up the rest of that 50, So picking a compromise price, as long as it appraised for at least this amount, we'll make up the rest, okay? The last one is saying, nope, the house has to appraise for the sales price. And if you're doing the last one, you got to give yourself enough time to actually get the appraisal done and returned to you. So this has to be a pretty big number. If I have a 30-day closing, I'm probably doing a 30-day number in there, because sometimes the appraisal does not show up until almost the week of closing or very shortly after. Yeah, I'd like to say it was much quicker than that, but that's not always the case. So sometimes you get appraisals pretty late into the process. And then I would write in $550,000 here. Don't put in 600. You can't ask for instant equity. That's not going to fly. I've actually seen offers like that. It should be the sales price that's in there. Now, what do I normally do? If I've done my work beforehand and I say the house is priced appropriately and I'm not really concerned about appraisal, especially if I'm in a competitive offer situation and Marquise's clients over there and, you know, Mark's clients over here, and Marquise has a VA offer, but he's at, let's say, 560, right? And Mark's over here and he's at 560 with an FHA offer, which I think FHA can go that high now. If I'm sitting here at 550, I'm going to tell my client, the best thing you can do is waive your appraisal. Because even though these guys are offering $10,000 more, the seller's guaranteed 550 from me. When it comes in at 545 or it comes in at 550 for you, it might be a loss at that point. And so oftentimes as a listing agent, I will do the same thing. Now I will sometimes go with the VA offer if I'm like, hey, at worst, if the conventional offer was so much lower than my VA offer, and I think I'm going to make somewhere in the middle, at worst, I'm still going to come out better, right? But to me, the only thing that a conventional offer has over the rest of them is the ability to waive the appraisal. So why would I not try to figure out a way to do that if possible? Now, do people like paying over appraised prices? Typically not, right? But what I also try to counsel my clients are, listen, an appraisal is a snapshot of a moment in time and not even necessarily today's moment in time. Because what does an appraisal look at? Sales from 6 months ago. So if the market starts to shift or change, when we were in the crazy times, 21, 22, and 23, appraisals could not keep up with the market because they were always looking in the rears, but the market was always appreciating at such a crazy valuation. I'm talking 10, 15, 20%, almost, on a quarterly basis, just homes just going crazy, popping up. So if I'm looking at something 6 months ago, well, of course, that house 6 months ago wasn't priced as high as the house that's happening right now when there's no inventory and everyone's going crazy for it, right? Now, the opposite happened last year. Prices started to plateau and drop a little bit. So appraisals were actually saying they were higher than what the market was saying they were. And now we've kind of come back to an even world at this point. So you're not there to convince your client one way or the other, but you're there to provide the information to them so they can come to a conclusion. And however much I say it, 9 times out of 10, my clients say, well, I'm not paying over the appraisal price, so I want to choose number 3. And I'll say, okay, that's what we're going to do then, but this is where we're at. And if I wasn't in a competitive offer situation, number 3 is probably the safest route to go. But if I'm telling a client to offer 550, or if I'm agreeing with their valuation of 550, it's because I've already done the work and said, yeah, this house will appraise for 550. Here are the comps that will support it, that we can make sure that the appraiser hopefully finds. Same thing, save as PDF, and then we move on. So now we'll knock out this non-realty. So let's say we were going to take this fridge. I can't remember if she included it in inclusions or not. Probably to my watch dryer, extra microwave oven, stove, just she did not. But we're going to ask for it anyways. And everything's negotiable, right? So included okay, right here, included 2025 LG kitchen refrigerator, right? So that's nice. It'd been smart of you to put it down here in inclusions also. That's where it belongs. But it's a good thing we read it and we saw it there as well. So what we want to do here, though, is we want to say we want this stuff, but we don't want to pay any money for it, right? We expect this to be free. So you can try to hit 0 in there. And if I just hit 0.00, for some reason, when I actually save it, it won't be there oftentimes. I don't know. It's a little quirk in there. So sometimes I'll just actually type the word 0. And then that does stay in there for some reason. And then I'm going to come here and I want to be specific. LG kitchen refrigerator at, or no, scene. What's today? The 06/05/2026. Because I want to say this is the one I saw. That's the one I expect to get, right? I've given the brand, I've given the location, and I've given the date. If I had the serial numbers and all that stuff, model numbers, serial numbers, like it says here in the document, cool. But unless I'm walking around with a notepad at the time when I'm doing my showings, writing down, information about the appliances, I'm probably not going to have that, right? So I want to be specific, because what I don't want to happen is for that 30-year-old white kitchen refrigerator that's in the garage to show up to be the one left in the house. And I was like, wait a second, I thought I was getting this beautiful and brand new refrigerator, and they left the one from grandma's house with me, so we don't want that. Now, on this document, be careful, because you might start getting carried away. I want the fridge. I want the washer and dryer. I want that audio equipment in the media room. I want the lawn furniture. I want all these things. Lenders are going to tell you we lend money on houses, not on stereo equipment, or not on this or that, right? former underwriters are all shaking their heads at me and stuff, And so you can get away with some, you can't get away with all of it. So usually fridge, not a problem. Washer and dryer, usually okay. Everything beyond that, you're going to need a bill of sale or something later to be outside the contract. That's going to be different. Doesn't mean you can have a bill of sale at $0 contingent upon the closing of this property, but we don't write bills of sale. So you're going to be tempted to, once again, that lawyer hat's going to want to come on. Well, you're going to say, hey, you know what? If you chat GPT bill of sale and type in the items in there, Mr. or Mrs. Client, they can do that for you real quick, or if you go into Google Docs and look up an invoice, you'll find a blank one that you can use for a bill of sale, but we can't create that for them. It's not our job. Signatures at the bottom, save as PDF. Now, if this was a cash deal, write whatever you want. No one cares. There's no lender involved. So write everything you want in there. Last but not least, right? We've done the other two, is just our HOA addendum. Now, we have to type in the name of the HOA, which in this case is the Vineyard Homeowners Association. Now, we have some information from the HOA in the seller's disclosure. She did not include an HOA profile sheet. That's an additional document as a listing agent you can request that your seller fill out. So we have the transfer fee, the resale certificate, the cost of the HOA would be monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, annually, whatever the case is. But I'm going to copy this guy. I click here for additional details. It's just the same information, no contact number. If I really, really wanted to try hard, I could try to find the contact number, but I don't really care because I'm making it their responsibility to find this information. If it was on me, then maybe I would, right? But if I'm asking the seller to do these things, I don't care because I've selected option 1 in paragraph A, giving the seller 21 days to deliver the resale certificate and all the other subdivision information, which we call the CCRs, the chapters, covenants, and restrictions, right? And I have 21 days to deliver this to me. And then once I get it, my buyer then has 3 days to review it to make a determination as to whether or not they actually want to move forward with the contract. So Mark, you're asking about other ways to get out of a contract. This is another one. This is one that I really, really don't even fully explain to my client because the one thing you don't want to have is a client with 1 foot out the door the whole entire time, right? Now, have I had to use this provision to get us out of a contract because a seller was being unreasonable? Yes, I have, but you have to be careful with that even, and we'll talk about that. So once I review that HOA information, I then, like I said, have 21 days to determine if I want to terminate. Now, as a listing agent, I'm okay paying for this, or maybe I'm not paying for it, my seller's paying for it, but I'm okay with them paying for it because I want to control that timeline as best as possible. And typically on day 11 of my contract, once the option period's over, I'm not waiting 21 days. I'm ordering that right away. I will usually have it back within 5 at the latest, present it, and then I will look at my calendar for 3 days to pass. So that way I can feel, okay, good. We're moving forward. We feel comfortable. Because what's messed up about it is you don't even have to cite the reason. I don't have to say, well, I wanted to, keep 10 pit bulls and they say I can only have 3. You know what I mean? You can just say, nope, don't like it. We're out, right? Now, if you're terminating based off of that, you can't have indicated you were going to terminate. You're waiting for that to be delivered just so you could terminate. Because some people will do that. They can't agree on option period. They've been going back and forth. And now it's 6 o'clock and their option period's expired. And they're like, well, you know what? Screw you. I'm just going to terminate when the HOA documents show up, right? Trek says that's a no-no. We've had people try that before. I made that threat before. So luckily I made that threat before Trek made that termination. And it was a seller agreed to one thing and then waited for the time to expire and they said, yeah, we're not signing anymore, right? And I was pretty upset about that. And I said, okay, Sister Smarty Pants, well, this is what we're going to do. And then they signed my amendment. And so you have to be careful with it, right? So you can hold it in your back pocket. But like I said, I don't usually even let my clients know. Well, I'm just saying, we're going to get the HO. I want you to review it, make sure there's nothing in that's too scary for you, right? Oh, hey, I'm in roof for my brother, for instance. My truck's in my driveway every night, has my roofing decals on, has everything on there. This HOA won't let me do it. I can't live here. All right, then we got to find a different house. You know what I mean? So that's understandable. 2 is the same thing, but now it's been on the buyer to order and pay for and deliver that information. So similar. 3 is saying the buyer has received the set of information. So they got the CCR. Sometimes we'll see those in associated documents. A seller will upload the CCRs, but the resale certificate still hasn't been delivered. And that's just a fee that HOAs charge to transfer properties back and forth. And then number 4, buyer does not require delivery of the subdivision information. This is when that old school broker says, I understand how this works, Alberto. I don't need this document. I say, well, my brokerage does, and we're going to check this little box for you to say that you don't need it, right? Now, C is talking about the transfer fee. The transfer fee is the responsibility of the buyer. That's Texas Property Code. And here in the MLS, it says that it's $375. It says Vineyard Homeowner Association, $270 quarterly, so that's what they pay every quarter, and then $375 transfer fee on there. So I would write $375 here. Now, it's important for Kat and for her client that she got the accurate number here. Because if it turns out that it's $400, or if it turns out that it's $500, my buyer would only be responsible for that $375, and the remaining amount would now be the responsibility of the seller. And seller shall pay any excess. So it's clearly right there, right? So it's important you do your due diligence as a listing agent to know what that is. Authorization. So if the title company has to order anything else that the seller maybe did not provide, who are they authorized to bill that to? I've always selected the seller because I selected the seller up top as well. So there might be what's called like a statement of accounts to show there's no outstanding balances on anything. Sometimes that is provided with the CCRs and resale certificate. Some HOAs don't automatically provide it, so they may have to go and order that later, right? Once again, save it as a PDF, send later for review. Now, had there been a second HOA, I would get a second document. If you look in your zip forms, there's this document times 4. There's 4 versions of it. They all look exactly the same. They just say 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that way you have separate ones for each HOA. You don't try to include all 3 HOAs or Mark Liz all on one document, because they're all going to have their own resale certificate costs. They're all going to have their own transfer costs. So each one needs to have their own addendum. And I might make it where Mark's client's responsible for one of them, my seller's responsible for the other, and vice versa. So it doesn't all have to be one party or the other. You can share those expenses. Cool. Everything is filled out now, right? Everything's ready to go for signature after managers review it. I don't know who will be in this room, but one of you will send me a document with signatures and initials all over and say, Alberto, can you review this? And I'll say, I can. And you got this stuff wrong, so now you got to go send it back to your client again for signatures and reviews. So it's important that you send it to us before they get eyes on it, because it's a little bit of a little sheepish. It just turned out the first one was just a joke. Do this one now; it's real, you know. So be careful with that. Send it to us. We'll get it back to you as quickly as possible, guys. You know, but typically, if you've had that conversation with the listing agent that an offer is pending, if you told your buyers that you're going to get this all filled out and do some work for them, you have a little bit of time, right? If it's at 10 o'clock at night, I'm not reviewing your contract. I'm going to tell you that right now. Okay. And you wouldn't be sending it to your client for a signature, and they wouldn't be signing it, and then you're going to be sent to their. So it's okay. Like there's those. Doesn't mean you can't send it to SA management and say, hey guys, I know it's late. Can one of you look at this thing first thing in the morning? I'd like the party as soon as possible. That's understandable, because there's a good chance you were working on this until the late in the evening to get this done. We're going to give you a homework assignment next week after our property tours days, where you're going to take some make-believe people based off of a property and based off of a scenario I'm going to give you, and you're going to write up a whole entire contract and all the addenda that go with it. And then we're going to review it the following week after sales meeting, all right, as a group here in a safe environment where there's no judgment, and we're all going to be friends at the end of it, right? But I will throw one of your poor souls up on the screen, and that's who I'm going to talk about the whole entire time, right? But it's important to do that because you have to practice it, right? You have to get comfortable with it. You know, not to brag on, but you know, my record from the Bill Miller's drive-through to our old office to when I sent everything out for signature was 13 minutes. And that was the 1 of 4 contract, the third-party finance addendum, the HOA addendum, a non-real time addendum, and a buyer's right to terminate due to lender's appraisal, and 2 tacos. All that, 13 minutes. That's all it takes. It does not take very long once you know what you're doing to it, right? Now, of course, it takes much longer when you're explaining it to your client if you need to break it through. And so you have to be prepared for that, because usually what's going to happen, you're going to send this off, click, 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 click. They just initial and sign everything, and you got it back now signed, and now you're good to go, right? However, if you get that client who says, Christina, explain this part to me over here. What's this paragraph mean? Why am I signing this here? Why do we put this dollar amount here? You got to be prepared for that, right? And so that's why it's comfortable. That's why you have to get comfortable doing this and reading it and understanding it. The reason I teach this contracts course isn't just because I've been here for almost 15 years at this point, because I've done a lot of business. I've been teaching this for a long time. But I always say the reason I got roped into this thing is because I did something that most other agents had never done before. I read the contract. And I did it for a selfish reason. I had my house in Corpus Christi on the market for sale. And I had hired a broker down there to do it because she was the most experienced broker, and I knew her. She was outside of our network, but this was a lady I wanted to work with. And we went under contract, and the house was a pain in the ass to sell. And finally, we got under contract. My bottom line, $300,000 cash deal though, so it was cool. Told them no repairs, no nothing else. Buy the house, right? The week of closing, that Monday, I get a call. Hey, they're having trouble insuring the house because of the age of the roof. Who's your current insurance provider? They want to know if they'll continue the policy. Sure, gave my Allstate guy, whatever. Turns out they wouldn't insure it. They would continue my policy, but they wouldn't insure it because of the age. I was on the coast. I was right on the water at a canal house there on Padre Island. Missed that house every day of my life. But anyways, the pool in the back, boat lift, fish off my back dock. Oh, okay. Anyways, I'm happy here, I promise. And so they came back and said, hey, we can't insure this property. We want you to split the cost of the roof with us. It's going to be $12,000. Here's our invoice. Nope. But we got to get insurance. And even my agent was like, Alberto, we have to have insurance. You have to have insurance on the coast. You have hurricanes, you have windstorms, you got flooding. You have to have insurance. I go, I appreciate that. But I told him what's going on. And I goes, give me a moment. I need to look at this. And if you read through the contract, this is a cash deal. No property insurance required at this point right now. Lender require insurance, but you don't have to. And I came back to her, and her name was Sherry Sperling. I think hope she's still with us because she was older at the time when I told her this. And she said, I said, Alberto, I said, Sherry, correct me if I'm wrong, but insurance isn't required. It's smart, but you don't require it. Alberto, you have insurance down here. We got hurricanes. I understand all that, Sherry. I go, but with this contract, it's a cash deal. Insurance is not required. And I always remember what she said because it made me laugh. She's like, holy shit, Alberto, you're right. And I was like, I go, so you tell the guy, my expectation is for him to close on my house on Friday, because if he doesn't, I remember he had put down $15,000 in earnest money. I go, I'm going to take his earnest money. I'm going to put a new roof on my house, and then I'm going to sell it for more. And there was a lot of back and forth. And this is back before you disclosed that you were an agent on the contract, even though she did disclose it on the MLS that I was a licensed agent. And the guy got upset because I knew my contract at that point. And sure enough, on Friday, he bought my house. I closed. Kind of almost wanted him not to, so I could take his money and do it that way. But it worked out. And I tell that story not to like pat myself on the back, but I tell you, because at that time, I was still a relatively new agent. I've only been doing this for a couple of years at that point, But if you take the time to read through it, you have to remember these documents are written for us. They're written for lay people, not for lawyers, and for lay people who, after 6 weeks of classes or 6 classes, is suddenly now able to then regurgitate this information out to the general public as well. But it does take time. And so just understand it, read it, say it out loud, read it to your spouse, your partner, your cat, your dog, I don't care. But the more you say it, the more you're going to become more comfortable with it, and the better you're going to get at it, and the faster you'll be able to do it, and the more confident you're going to feel when you're presenting it to your clients or discussing it, So any questions, guys? Any concerns? I know it's a lot of information that hits you today. Today is like the day that, you feel like you got gut punched and then knocked out at the same time. But we made it this way purposely, so that way you could take what you just saw on DocuSign and then kind of apply it to an actual transaction. Like I was saying, if we sent these out for signature, they would look something like this when they were all done. Just to kind of, these are a couple buyers I have right now. So once they get this little green symbol, now that means you have a actual signed document that you can't edit, you can't change anymore, you can't do anything. And so, for instance, like with these folks here, I think we're going to put them on pause for a little bit. If this was the contract that they were writing, which God, I wish that was their budget, all I would do was import their buyer's rep, import their IBS into this room, and then attach my task list and be good to go with it. But once again, when you talk about that procedural stuff, once it becomes a little bit more real. Otherwise, enjoy your weekend. It's been a lot. The first week's always a lot, right? Enjoy your weekend. Don't feel like you are not ready to start doing business, though. So if you have shadowing opportunities, go shadow an open house. If you want to go talk to some builders because you got a new business card and you want to show it off, go do that, right? Get out there, start previewing property, start looking at stuff. Let people know on social media that you guys all just completed your first week of training, that you're excited to be out there as a resource to them and to help them in any way possible. And then we'll see you on Monday. Remember, Tuesday after the sales meeting, we're all going out for a drive. All right, we're gonna go look at some houses around the neighborhood here. We'll show you how to walk through homes and all that fun stuff, and kind of have that fun. So Tuesday's a field trip day.
Alberto, I knew we had that meeting on Tuesday, but yesterday, Erin, I don't know if it's just me. She's gonna do a Moxie training.
Yeah, but that's not for you guys. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's not.
Well, it can't. I mean, normally it would have been. It would have been fine, but property tours. And for you, you know how to show a house, so you're more than welcome to stay here. You know what I mean? For everyone else, it's better that you guys got out in the field and actually look at property. So yeah, I'm okay.
I was gonna go on a fishing trip from.
Well, that I can't give you an excuse you want a fishing trip. I give you an excuse
But I
to.
was gonna say more like- But I was gonna hold off to throw an errands shop.
Yeah.
Workshop, but if I guess.
Take care, guys.